Welcome back to the show. This is Remington Ramsey and my co-host Taylor J. Hall.
Boom goes the dynamite.
Every episode, you're welcome. We have an awesome guest today. But before we get into our guest, Taylor, I was on my way here and I heard about this story. This happened in Indianapolis. And honestly, Indianapolis, you should be proud of this. This guy should not be. This guy who they don't say his name. Oh, they do say his name, but I'm not gonna say his name because I don't want him to become famous because of me. This guy's driving in Indianapolis, going 100 miles an hour, and he's filming himself go 100 miles an hour on Facebook Live and then posts it to his profile. The cops find out because that gets around. Go to his house. Prosecute him, take him. He's actually in jail, gets out of jail, and then on the way to get his sentencing, he does it again. Is this guy not crazy or what? This is Indianapolis. I just thought that was kind of interesting, being that we are all in Indianapolis, and this guy is trying to kill us all.
Hold on. Can we get an age?
This guy is 28 years old. I thought it was you when I first read it, but then I remembered you have a Prius, so...
It gets up over
Does it
100.
even? It does go over 100?
It does go over 100. You'd be
Awesome.
surprised.
I feel like you're like Fred Flintstone in the Prius, just going as fast as you can with your feet.
No, that would be loud. The Prius doesn't make noise.
Eric, do you drive fast?
No, not really. Not typically.
Listen, you can't
I
talk
don't
it. We haven't
follow the
introduced
speed
you.
limit.
People don't know who you are. We got to introduce you first. Take it easy over there. All right. The theme of the show today is Zero to Hero. And the reason why is our guest in 2012 had $10 in his bank account, which most of you, I'm guessing, had more than that in 2012, and went from that to selling paint, and from selling paint to making $1.3 million in gross commissions sales in real estate last year in Indianapolis. Welcome to the show, Mr. Eric Forney.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate that. It's a little embarrassing to mention I had $10, but
Yeah, sorry about that.
Of it.
It's but it is what it is, right?
Yeah,
I mean, $10 in your bank account, and I remember, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that come on the show, and there's almost a sense of pride of where you came from to where you got to, and so I'm glad you shared that with me. I think that's relatable. I don't know how many people got that far down.
Yeah.
But was that? I guess I'll just start with that. Was that decisions that you made that got you to that point?
Oh, for sure, absolutely. So, I think as an entrepreneur, you have this mindset that whatever you do, you just can't fail. And I think that's unfortunately how I think. And I don't know that I have an inflated self-worth. It's just that I'll figure out how to make it work if things go wrong. And so, I was making at the time probably 40, 45, 50,000, and somehow thought it'd be a good idea to buy 2 houses as an investment and rehab them simultaneously. And things didn't go according to plan, and so
that was before you were in real estate.
Yeah, it was before I had a real estate license, and I remember I had $10 and probably $70,000 in credit card debt, and returning building supplies to Menards because they sell groceries. So I had a $96 gift card at Menards, and I remember standing in their like makeshift grocery aisle and thinking, okay, what can I buy for $96 that will last me the longest? And I got dried soup and cereal and milk. So I figured I could get the most amount of meals out of those 2 items. So
did you know that Menards had groceries? Is that
I don't want to make light of this. I don't want to make light of this. Yes, and we've had the dry soup. It's actually good.
Yeah.
Is it dry when you eat it?
No, it's dry. You make it at home, but they have a bunch of different types of soup, and they're actually really good.
Yeah, of all the things he just said, we should take the next 20 minutes and talk about dry soup. That's
I'm just saying. You asked. I'm telling you, it's good.
So Menards. Okay, good. I have never personally shopped at Menards for my groceries, so you learn something in every podcast, I guess. That's fantastic. And so you're not but at that point you're not an entrepreneur. And even when you go to sell paint, technically not really an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It wasn't until you decided. I mean, what made you decide? Hey, I'm tired of living this life, and not to knock against people who do sell paint. I'm sure you can make a decent living at that. But as an employee and not doing what you wanted to be doing, why did you change?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always had that entrepreneur side to me, and I've always thought that I could do a little bit of anything. And so, when I was selling paint, I might have side hustle painting houses or painting rooms or anything I could to generate any additional money. And so I think that's always been my thing is how can I continue to improve myself and take what I do know and make some money. And so I watch my customers come in and, I'm selling to painters. I mean, there's some guys that don't have a GED, and I'd maybe watch them make $30,000 flipping a house. And I thought, if this guy can do it, then so can I. Well, I didn't know anything about construction, and I had never owned a home before. So it didn't quite go according to plan, but I thought I could do it at least.
And technically, from what I understand from your story, you were kind of let go from that job.
Yeah.
Was that a pivotal moment in a decision time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I basically I'd been with Sherwin-Williams for 7 years, and I had decided that no longer something I wanted to do. And so I did the math, and I said, okay, well, if I could flip 4 houses a year, I could essentially double my income, and then I would never have to worry about calling on painters ever again. And so that was my goal. I was going to flip 4 houses a year. Well, I bought one house that was way too big of a project, and I ended up having to invest too much time in that project and not enough time in my job. And so, but it was all in. I mean, I burnt the boats and didn't go back. So,
it
it worked out pretty well.
Hashtag burn the boats.
I don't know if that's going to catch on, but
sure it will.
It could, I guess. Let's talk about habits.
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds like some of the habits you may have kicked were just focusing your time on something that was a better option for you. But for someone who has been through something maybe not on a scale of this magnitude, what are the habits that you kicked, and what good habits did you start implementing that really got you to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really obsessive about learning, and I think that's the biggest thing that has really been a predictor of success for me. Is it's all about input and matching my output, and so what I had to do was change what I was inputting every day, and that was a knowledge-based thing, and so I've had to basically change my entire routine and try to learn as much as possible. So I would stand at the paint counter and ask contractors questions about how to hang drywall, how to make a drywall repair, how to install hardwood floors, because I had no experience of doing that, but I at least ask enough questions to learn. And the biggest habit change now has been whatever the topic is that I need improvement on, is just being all in on learning that however I can.
That reminds me of the quote, dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, you can't see Eric right now, but this is a one sharp-dressed dude.
Sharp-dressed.
Have you always been, do you always dress like this?
I'm a little metro when it comes to my wardrobe, but one of the changes I made mentally was to change the way I dressed. I've told this story before, and I got into real estate, and I got a call on a lead for like a house for like 1.2 million. Somebody wanted to see it. Well, I'd never been in $1 million house. I didn't know what somebody who could buy $1 million house did for a living, how much money they made. I didn't know any of that stuff. And so I was supposed to be at a bachelor party that weekend that they wanted to see houses. I skipped going to the bachelor party, and I stayed home, and I looked at every single $1 million house that had sold in Indy for the last 5 years.
Wow.
And I basically took notes as to what the expected features of the house were, what someone would expect. And I showed up in a suit, and I showed up prepared, and they never knew any different.
How many houses were that? Do you remember?
No, I don't. I don't remember, but I know not a lot of them sell every year.
Sure.
Not as many as I wish they did.
Especially in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We were talking before the show started that you have essentially you when you hear those numbers, $1.3 million in gross commissions in a year, you think, okay, this guy's selling the big properties. There's not a lot of them in Indianapolis because the market's pretty inexpensive for the most part across the country. This guy's selling all the $1 million properties, but that's not true. Your average sale is what?
Yeah, I mean, we're right now really in the low 200s, and not where we want to be. Now, one thing we've tried to do a good job of is start to build predictable revenue, because I think that real estate agents do a poor job of actually having a predictable revenue model. And so we've started working with investors more, and that brings the average price point down a little bit. So on our retail side, we're probably in the like 240-ish range. but when you factor investors and retail in, we're really right around 200. So just the total market average.
So I mean, people hear those numbers, they're like, "Well, I wish I could just sell one home and make that much money," but he's just working that much harder. When you have that average sale, you're just working harder than everybody else.
Do you watch $1 Million Listing?
I've never watched it.
Never
No,
watched
I
it?
don't have cable. Am I allowed to say that?
Yes, you can say that.
Yeah, because our show does not air on cable. So
It
you
does
can say
not.
whatever you want.
Okay,
No,
good.
you've cut the. How long have you
Not
cut
yet,
the
at
cord
least.
for?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Probably the last 3 years.
Wow. So $1 Million
It's
Listing.
$180 a month. I can't.
Yeah,
I
mean,
can't
it's-
take on that expense.
I mean, you've come a long
Times
way.
are tough.
Yes.
$10
So
in the
$1
bank
Million
account.
Listing. That's you see the commissions they make on these.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
we're talking 10 plus, 20 plus $1 million homes,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I think people see that, and it's obviously our market's a lot different, but it's just so unrealistic. It's like seeing someone else post something on social and think just because they did it.
You know what else is unrealistic though? Speaking of like those,
Are you going to talk about your hands for our viewers that are watching? Because you
No,
just
why?
put them out there.
Yeah, I mean,
And I
who
was like,
cares?
what's he doing?
It doesn't matter what I do with my. This
What are
is
you
a
doing with
radio
your
show.
hands? What are you doing?
No, what else is unrealistic is those shows that are like the fixer upper shows.
Oh,
They're
yep.
like, so John and Sally have a budget of $20 and they're gonna renovate this entire home, and they're quoting prices that are just so ridiculous. How do
Right.
so, being in real estate, how do
Yeah.
they get away with that? Like, are there literally parts of town that are just like way cheaper to build a home, or what? I mean, what's going on there?
I mean, well, it's hard to say like what happens. I mean, you do see, people who like buy wholesale properties that are run down and, take advantage of sellers and stuff. I saw the other day the city sold a property to someone who flips here in town for $500.
Wow.
So, there are some renewal efforts where the city may give property away at a significant discount for it to be updated. But yeah, for the most part in our market, those numbers don't work. I mean, I think the best project I've had is probably 40,000, and that's one project that's been anywhere close to that from a
40,000 as in a renovation project.
Sorry, yeah. As far as so I flip as well, and on a very small scale, and I think 40,000 is probably the most profit I've earned on a flip.
And what's the price range of the home?
That one actually I got lucky. That one was 140,
Okay.
and
And I feel that's a pretty popular, in Indy at least, that's a pretty popular, between 150 and 200 is
Correct.
some of the most popular price ranges for flips, from what I understand. Is that
yeah,
accurate?
yeah, and what you can do as well is you can get people to overpay for them. So when I bought it, I was running numbers on 125 because that was where it comped, but because it was developed so well and there's such a shortage of inventory, we could charge an extra 10% essentially, and that was all profit. So
So this is interesting. I mean, we're filming this in the GVC Mortgage. We're definitely a real estate-based podcast for the most part, and I want to get back to some of your coaching and speaking that you do.
Yeah.
But before we do that, just speaking to your expertise as a realtor, why do you think the market, the Indianapolis market, is such a hot market for real estate?
Well, I mean, part of it is, anywhere you go online, you can find people who are advising you to invest in Indianapolis real estate. It seems like Kansas City and Indianapolis are the most popular ones. I mean, you get some Cleveland and Detroit sprinkled in, but a lot of it is
Detroit.
because yeah. Well, I mean, because you can buy so cost effectively,
Right.
and there's so much money poured into the economy there, but in Indy, you still get a pretty good return rate on an investment from a buy and hold perspective. And so, I can buy a ranch for $120 still in the townships and rent it for $12.50 a month. If you leverage that with a mortgage, you're talking somewhere around 20% cash on cash return sometimes. So where else can you borrow someone else's money and get 20% return rate? That's a big part of it. I see a ton of people get taken advantage of because they buy sight unseen from California, New York, wherever, because they see how cheap things are, and then they buy a dumpster fire and turn around and have to resell it, which is good for us.
You think it's typically the out-of-town buyers that happens to?
Absolutely. I mean, my opinion is the investment business is the most crooked portion of the real estate process, and that it's easy to go online and sell what an amazing deal you have, what a great rate of return is. There are paper rates of returns, where you put a spreadsheet together and that's the rate of return that you should get. And then there's the real life rate of return, which is what you actually get by the time you have to put a new furnace and roof and evict a tenant and everything else. So there's what people are sold online versus the reality. And
This is good stuff. This is a lot of good stuff. I would like to pause for a minute to have Taylor tell you guys where you can get a hold of us, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of questions from this podcast, and I'd love to be able to answer them either on social media or through email or something like that. So where can people find us, Taylor?
So if you are a viewer or listener, you can find us on Twitter at As Indy Grows, Instagram As Indy Grows, Facebook As Indy Grows. You can check us out on our website, asindygrows.com, or send us an email at asindygrows@gmail.com.
That's how you brand.
That well,
there's a huge amount of
it wasn't very subtle, was it? I have a question.
Yeah.
If Amazon comes to Indianapolis, what does that mean for the real estate market?
It's a lot of talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess what is really a big shortage of inventory problem becomes that much worse,
more magnified.
I mean, that to me is the biggest problem. Is what does that do to what's already an inventory crisis?
How do we fix that? I hear this all the time. There's not enough inventory. Who needs to fix it, and how do we fix it?
Well, I mean, there's, I guess it depends on who you ask. From just hearing multiple angles and approaches to it, there's several issues. I mean, municipalities are enacting more strict architectural guidelines. That causes the cost to go up, of course. Land prices are not cheap at this point. Building costs are not cost effective. Now, having been on the other side of the building process as someone who sold construction goods and materials, I would say that profits have gone up significantly on the builder side. I don't think that the material costs have gone up to the degree in which people have claimed, but that's an argument for another day. And then, it's also, but it's a national problem. There really is no affordable housing options across the country. And unless someone comes up with a way to do somewhat manufactured housing at a cost-effective rate, it's only going to get worse. I don't foresee it getting better.
So it seems like you put so much time into that first $1 million listing that you were going to go and try and pitch yourself for. So obviously you wouldn't have done that, I feel, just from vibing, if you didn't have a passion for that. Is becoming a realtor, is that because part of your passion for flipping and parlaying that into the real estate side?
Yeah, I mean, I have a passion now for sure for real estate and pretty much all things real estate related, but I'm also one of those people that when I commit to doing something, I really immerse myself in it. So, when I got a job selling paint, which was never ever what I envisioned I would do in life, I immersed myself in learning about the molecular content of a gallon of paint, which is the nerdiest thing ever. Like,
nope.
I'm sure he could sell you a gallon now, though.
Yeah.
I can tell he could do
When's
that.
the last time you sold paint?
I got let go from Sherwin Williams in 2013, and the next week I started with Behr Paint. I worked there for a year and a half, I think. So actually, I want to say it was August of 2015.
Okay.
That's probably the last
So,
time.
but when you're, because you buy and
No,
sell
it
and
might have
flip,
been you
you flip
August.
homes. Do you ever get a paint quote and you're like, no.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
He can call these people out
Next time I get a
immediately.
paint job bid,
He's
I'm
gonna
calling
send it to
Eric
you,
over.
yeah.
He's gonna be in my house, be like, all right, you talk to this guy.
I mean, that's a huge value add for our customers, though, is that we manage a lot of remodel projects for them. And so, we manage, I've got painters working today for out-of-state sellers. They're having their house repainted so that we can list it next week. We have flooring contractors that we use. It's a big selling feature for us, is the amount of money that we save them on their rehab bids typically offsets whatever cost difference that there may or may not be between us and a discount agent or someone who's cost cutting.
So your knowledge has taken you. Your knowledge and your passion has taken you to a place where now you speak. You're a keynote speaker, coach of some sorts. I've actually heard you speak this past week. I did, and there's 3 things that I wanted you to speak to on the podcast. The first one is systems. You talk a lot about systems. The second one is people. which I'm assuming is relationships, and the third one is money. And I think you look at all three of them kind of differently than a lot of people do, and that's probably what attests to your success in this. So let's start with number one in systems. So what are your beliefs about systems?
So I find this fascinating because as a real estate agent, people think of the traditional real estate agent as really as a mom and pop type business, as a relationship business. And it is. And that's how I set out for it to be. And what happened was basically I grew the business at such a pace where it couldn't be a one person job anymore. And so in order to keep growing, because I wasn't willing to not grow anymore, in order to keep growing the business, we had to start putting in systems to allow it to grow. And that's what every other business does, but real estate agents do a miserable job of, is duplicating themselves.
Why is that?
Because I think it's an ego business, for one, is you think you're the only one who can do the job to the same degree. And that may or may not be true, but what I found is that while I may or may not be able to do the job, I might not be as effective and I might not be as fast at doing it. And so we've had to have systems that allow what I do to be duplicatable as much as possible and get leveraged out to the second one, which is people. And so people for my business has been huge because, we sold 207 houses last year. I can't do that as one person, and to sell 300 houses, I need that many more people. And so, I'm fortunate that I have an amazing operations director who is better with systems than I am. I have the ability to typically foresee what problems we're going to have. I just don't do as well as actually implementing them. And so, so we work well in that I do the vision piece of it very well, and he does the integration side, and he also does well on the vision piece, but definitely more on the integration. And then we're just start to look is where does the system break down, and then where do we insert a person? And so, we believe that when there's a problem, you're missing a person, and so now we're looking for more people.
Is that your quote? Because I'm gonna quote it.
I don't think it's my quote. No, I probably stole it from someone. Let's be real.
Steal from the best. What was that again? That was really good.
Where there's a problem, you're missing a person. And what we know now is that as I keep growing and we have big goals for the business, that we have to keep hiring. And so we brought someone on last month, and I've done a poor job of training them, which means that I'm missing a person. And that's someone whose job it is to hire, train, recruit, and manage, because I'm out on appointments or doing things like this. So we're looking for a sales director so that we can continue pacing up. And in real estate, in our market, I don't know of any teams that have a sales director. But that's the next phase for us in growth, is we can leverage to 10, 20 agents, 400, 500 sales a year by having additional layers of management.
And the third one is money. And I've heard your take on money, and it's a little different, basically making your money work for you. But what are your thoughts on money?
Yeah, so, especially as it pertains to real estate, one of the things that we're not afraid to do is reinvest into the business. So, I take a salary from the business that is low by income standards, given, the substantial amount of income that we generate. I take a salary from that, and then we double down on reinvesting into the business. And I try to pay people well. Typically, we pay better than our competitors because I think that, again, if we have problems, I need people, and I need the best people to fix those problems. And then we track and measure the return on all of that. So if we spend $70,000 on a marketing campaign, it better bring us 5 to 1 on that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just going to ask, what does reinvesting in your business mean to you? Is it hiring that person? Is it putting more money into a digital ad campaign? Is it sponsoring an event?
Yeah.
Is it just a little bit of everything?
All of those. Yeah, we do all of those. So, we sponsor client events, and then we track and measure them. I use an example. We rented out, we got 140-ish tickets, I think, for a suite at the Indianapolis Indians game last year. And it rained that day. It cost us $6,600 to do that. It rained, and probably like half the people didn't show up. And then, so let's say 70 people showed up. Well, we rented out space at the Indianapolis Zoo. We got 210 tickets for like $3,500. And those people that didn't show up, the zoo reimbursed us money. We had more people show up to the zoo for half the price. So the Indians game is trash, right? We're not going to do that again. We just
No offense, Indians.
Yeah.
No offense.
It's not the Indians' fault. It's
Indianapolis
my
Indians.
clients.
It was the weather.
it was the weather's
It was the
fault.
weather.
It's true. So yeah, I mean, we track all of that engagement, and then in our CRM we track who shows up, who doesn't, who sends referrals, who buys and sells, and somewhat of the ROI of the customer, really, which is not normal in our business.
All right, well, we're going to ask that you ask our listeners the question of the day. So this is just basically a question based on what we've been talking about. What's the question that you can challenge our listeners with? But first, we got some Taylor's takeaways. So Taylor,
Taylor's
take it away.
takeaways. So it's not Tay or Tay's takeaways.
Takeaways.
So I think one of the big things one of the main problems people will have in either a management or a leadership capacity is being able to delegate. Feeling comfortable enough to pass
Yep, I wrote that down
some
too.
responsibilities down to them. And my personal rule with them is if they can do 80% of what I think I can do and the other 20% is just small logistics, I'm good with that. So being able to delegate is going to add a lot of time back into your day, which I think is huge. The other one is reinvest in your business. It's very cliche because you hear a lot of people say this, but there's so many people that have the entrepreneur mindset where they're making a lot of money in the business, and as opposed to taking a huge salary, what they're doing is they're doubling down on their strengths. I think it's very smart. You're looking at your analytics, figuring out what works, and actually putting more money into that. That's very huge.
What is your question of the day, my friend?
Ooh, so, I guess I'll probably. I love this question because I think it summarizes me and the question we kind of should ask ourselves every day is today are you today are you focusing on a lack of resources or resourcefulness? And so I mean, we live in an age in which you can get the answer to anything on earth you want, whether it's you want to learn how to put on a podcast or buy and sell a house. It's resources versus resourcefulness, and which one are you going to be?
I love it. Thank you, Eric. Where there is a problem, you're missing a person with Eric Forney. Great stuff, buddy.
Thanks
for
guys.
being on the
Thank you very
podcast.
much.
Thank you.